Welcome rain on this blackened land just west of Sydney. It's not the first downpour since the fire season began last year, but it's reduced the number of active blazes and is bringing relief to areas gripped by the worst drought on record.
You're watching the birth of an iceberg. From a mile away, there's a faint rumble as Antarctica's William Glacier first crumbles, then collapses, a tower weighing thousands of tons toppling into the fjord, then rolling with a torrent of water and ice falling off its sides. The vibrations trigger further ice falls, left and right, the camera barely able to keep up. While a crewmate filmed up on the bridge of our British Antarctic Survey ship, there was astonishment.
So as I say, you've got bits of it moving this way, the whole front then moved off to the right, and then it just started another cascade further and further and further down the glacier, at which point we were already turning around to make our way out into deeper water, because we just really weren't sure exactly how much more of it was going to collapse. But the whole face of the glacier, as you're looking at it now, is a completely different vista to what it was 2 days ago.
But a few hours later, we venture back in. The huge iceberg is grounded on the seabed. Offcuts are still splitting and spinning.
Here in New Hampshire, the crucial Democratic debate right here tomorrow night, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But we begin tonight with that dangerous line of storms tearing across several states tonight, heading into several major cities in the east. At least 20 tornadoes already reported, and at least 2 people killed. Children huddling inside the hallways at a preschool in Simpsonville, South Carolina. And look at this tonight, workers holding the doors shut against powerful winds in Spartanburg, South Carolina. In Knoxville, Tennessee, torrential rains, flooding roads, cars underwater. And in Alabama, 1 person was killed when severe storms swept through, homes destroyed, some washed away.
Across parts of the South this evening, thunderbolts are raining down, and families recovering from severe storms today are bracing for more tonight. The tornado sirens were blaring in Athens, Georgia. In uptown Charlotte, there were warnings to take cover. A reported tornado was approaching the city.
All of Mecklenburg County is in a tornado warning right now. Of course, a lot of populated areas, a lot of folks in school.
At this South Carolina preschool, children were singing to themselves as they sheltered in the hallways. At this furniture store in Spartanburg, they had to hold on to this door to keep the high winds from blowing it away. These are the heavy rains in Knoxville, Tennessee, and the flooded roads. In Gatlinburg, the river through town was raging. Outside Chattanooga, first responders had to rescue this man by boat after his SUV was surrounded by floodwaters. The water rose so high in Harlan County, Kentucky, mobile homes were washing away. The high winds snapped trees across the storm zone. This dash camera video shows a driver on the highway nearly getting hit by a falling tree on Interstate 285 in the Atlanta suburbs. Other drivers weren't so fortunate. Thankfully, no one was seriously hurt. This storm system has claimed at least 2 lives, including an Alabama woman killed in her home.
The damage is total here. As you can see, what was left of that mobile home strewn across all of these trees.
High winds ripped it apart.
In the icy waters of Antarctica, scientists use a method unchanged in 100 years to catch and study plankton. But in their fine meshed net, they now also find a 21st century threat.
I think we might have a surprise in here. There's something bright green.
It's hard plastic, perhaps part of a bottle cap, slowly degrading as it drifts on the current in the most isolated and pristine place on the planet.
It's not only where lots of people live, it's in remote, pristine places. It gets everywhere with global currents, ocean currents, it gets distributed. And yeah, you can find it even here in such remote places in Antarctica.
British Antarctic Survey's ship, the James Clark Ross, is a floating laboratory. On board is another scientist trying to quantify for the first time the amount of microplastic in the fjords. It's there, in every litre of seawater that she carefully filters.
Right there is a fiber, There's a couple of fragments in the middle and more fibers over here.
Under the microscope, there are even more.
Lots more plastic than I was expecting to see. So far, it's easily in the hundreds per liter of water, which is very sad because the locations we're looking at are new habitats. They're essentially pristine, untouched. Most of the places we're at are actually unsurveyed. So you wouldn't expect to see a bunch of human influence, but so far there definitely has been.
Plastic is rapidly increasing in the South Atlantic, and scientists believe it's coming Antarctica's way. Antarctica's marine creatures like this tiny crustacean are already having to deal with rapid climate change, warming seas, disappearing sea ice and strengthening winds. But the appearance of so much plastic so quickly is putting them under new stress. The question is, if it gets into the food chain, can they cope?
Our planet's ice sheets are enormous, around 10 million square kilometres in size, and they're melting. But just how much fresh water is flowing into our oceans and how quickly has been notoriously difficult to assess. The climate can vary widely from one part to another. They're affected by different weather events, the thickness of the ice, the temperature and flow of the ocean around it. The long-held view of the IPCC, that's the UN body dealing with climate change, has been that if we do nothing and continue on our current trajectory, sea levels could rise by as much as a metre by 2100. Here's the coastal city of Miami by that assessment. But new scientific research just published in the US predicts sea levels will rise by twice as much. The city of Shanghai would cease to exist, along with many island nations and other coastal cities.
The 2-metre sea level rise that we project to 2100 is not the most likely scenario, but it is a plausible scenario. So it is one that we should consider if we want to plan and adapt to future sea level rise. It was based on the assumption that we carry on increasing our emissions of greenhouse gases into the future. And I mean, sadly, carbon emissions have carried on increasing even after the Paris Agreement in 2015.
The authors combined the assessments of 22 scientists and insist this is a worst-case scenario, a world where we've not taken action, where global temperatures have hit 5 degrees Celsius and the world's seas have risen by 2 metres. They say there is still time to act, but that has yet to happen. Just last week, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency said carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere from burning fossil fuels such as oil and coal is now at its highest level in human history.
Turn next to the fire catastrophe in Australia.
Apocalyptic scenes.
Some 130 fires are burning right now, scorching more than 14 million acres of land. At least 25 people have been killed and more than 2,000 homes destroyed.
Who could forget these horrific images of this little koala in the fire and the courageous woman that ran in to save it? While the argument goes on about whether or not the drought in Australia has been caused by global warming, the point is that it's God that gives the rain and he withholds it when a nation becomes sinful. And it certainly does look like Australia has lost God's blessing on its wonderful land. Meanwhile, the Muslims are claiming that God hears their prayers because when they prayed, it rained. Well, it rained a little bit. Atheists noticed that the Mormons also prayed for rain, but it didn't rain too much for them either. Then again, the Prime Minister asked that all Australians pray for rain, and that got the whole world joining in, including the Catholic Church, Protestant churches, and even the meditative folks who told everyone to, quote, breathe and feel the rain stopping the fires. The Anglicans didn't know whether or not they should pray for rain because a few years ago the editors of their prayer book removed the obviously not needed prayer for rain. Whatever the case, a drought makes us look to the heavens, and it's tragic that it takes so much suffering before we'll humble ourselves and do just that.
I actually used to be an atheist and was pretty strongly against God, and I think that was more of a rebellious phase or lack of understanding on my part.
You've been following what's going on in Australia?
Not too closely. I'm aware that there are fires, but I haven't read too deeply into that.
You realize a lot of people have died in the fires, and literally millions of animals?
I've heard that number on the radio, about 500 million animals, and I think 25 was the number of people deceased.
Do you believe in God's existence?
Oh, yes, indeed.
Do you think he's in charge of the weather department?
Yeah, in charge of everything.
So why would he withhold rain from Australia? All they need is a good downpour and it'll fix everything, but it's not happening.
Things happen that we don't understand why they happen, you know? But it's not always for us to understand.
We do know that what's happening in Australia isn't really a sign of his blessing. You know, it's a horrible thing that's happening, and it's making people think about God, which is one good aspect out of a horrible tragedy. I mean, do you think there's an afterlife?
The afterlife is a tough one for me to...
Are you afraid of dying?
No.
Have you buried loved ones?
Yes.
Didn't that make you think about the issues of life and death?
Oh, yes, indeed.
And why do you think we die?
Without death, there'd be no life.
Yes, there would. I don't need to die to enjoy life.
No, I mean, but if you didn't die, then really what would be the point of existing, you know?
I can handle it.
But the deluge is also sweeping piles of ash, soot and other debris into rivers, lakes and dams that provide drinking water to those living nearby.
We've never had an experience like this before. During the bushfire period, look, we had over 385,000 hectares of the catchment actually burnt. And those fires actually came down to the waterline, so it's a significant impact the bushfires have had across there.
This is Warragamba Dam. It supplies 80% of Sydney's drinking water, but could be contaminated by charred debris from the vast bushfires in the area. Scientists say it probably won't cause any health problems, but authorities aren't taking any chances. They've put in silk curtains to catch any material that could affect water quality and are monitoring the situation closely. Contaminated water isn't just a problem for humans. Small pieces of ash from trees like this can get into the waterways and suffocate the fish. They can also cause algal blooms, which can produce dangerous toxins or cut the amount of oxygen in the water, and that can put other wildlife at risk.
Sadly, a whole heap of dead fish.
Thousands of fish died in January when rains washed sludge into the Macleay River in New South Wales. And late last year, piles of ash clogged the beaches as fires raged nearby. Many bushfires are still burning up and down this coastline, leaving waterways and water supplies at risk.
It takes decades for a forest to regrow and to restabilise. We will be dealing with different quality water, different organic matter coming down, higher sediment loads for many years, and I would predict in many cases, certainly in Sydney's case, decades.
New growth is beginning to push through the scorched landscape, but the cost of this unprecedented fire season is mounting, and it's not over yet.